First of all, Ron, kind of characterize what it's been like for you and the whole board of directors the last couple of months. And I know you guys met yesterday on the phone, but what has it been like the last couple of months to have to do everything kind of away from each other?
Well, yeah, it's that part has been very difficult. We were actually able to meet in person yesterday. We went to a hotel so we could social distance and spread out, and it was just nice to be back and have a personal meeting and be able to rekindle some of that, that camaraderie and friendships. And it was just nice to be around some folks for a change instead of on a Zoom all the time.
Yeah, what has it been like overall just without any spring sports here in the last couple of months, Ron?
Well, very frustrating, obviously, especially when we woke up the weekend of state track and we had beautiful weather here, and to know that we weren't going to be able to do that, and as we talked about earlier, this year, just the seniors. I mean, we feel bad for all the kids, obviously, but the seniors had such a unbelievable end to their high school careers, both academically and the different events that they have going on at the schools besides our sports and activities. So it's been frustrating. It's in this business we're pretty much used to trying to have control of everything and be organized and those types of things, and we certainly don't have any control over a lot of the stuff going on right now. So we're trying to. That was kind of the focus of this board meeting. We did have some action items, but we really have been working on putting together fall plans just to try and what if the heck out of them and see if we can be as prepared as possible once the fall rolls around.
Well, you're just over, I think it's 2 months and a week away from 4A football practice starting, and as well as golf and tennis and things like that. So where are you a couple months out right now? What is kind of the plan right now?
Well, we have each sport, we put a committee together. We had board members on each one of those committees, and then we tried to get some ADs that have a little bit of expertise in those areas. And we have all of our Plan A's for every committee, all 6 fall sports that we have, is to start and have our season as regularly scheduled and go as normal. But we then went to, and depending on the sport, like in football where you only play once a week, they went week by week. So if we start a week late and we can't play week 1, here's what that looks like. If we have to start 2 weeks late, 3 weeks. So they had a plan all the way down through H, I believe. And as they advanced, obviously we got more restrictive. We might look at eliminating the quarterfinals and only have semis and finals. And our last one was even no semis. We would have finals only. And just trying to, if we get to that point, trying to make the best out of a bad situation as we can. We realized, and always knew, but it really came to light this spring, culminating events are very important to our kids and our schools. And so we are going to, if we were to get the second wave they keep talking about, if there's any way, who knows, if we could anticipate that, hey, in a couple of weeks it looks like, we're going to have another spike here, then we would have the state championships in all 6 sports the next weekend if we could. I mean, that's the type of stuff we're trying to look at. We don't know exactly all the quarantining periods and how that's going to work. If it's going to be per kid, per team, do you have to go back and whoever they played the last week or 2 weeks, do we have to quarantine everybody? A lot of those will be based obviously on testing and where we're at with some of that type of stuff. I would imagine, and we've been in contact with the state health department several times. We haven't been able to talk to them yet. I'd be curious. I'm assuming Legion has something in place right now that they would have had to have in their plan, and so I was just kind of curious, and we'll follow up with that and see what with where they're at right now. And obviously by August or September, that certainly could change as everything seems to be changing as we move forward, and just the fluidity of it all is frustrating, but it's also the reality, so we deal with it and we try and go forward. Now, some of our other sports, we feel the outdoor sports, and especially the individual sports, we should have a lot more flexibility there. With golf, everyone's golfing around the state right now, and tennis kind of leads itself to social distancing just by the nature of the sport, and we really didn't deal with the fan part of it right now because we don't know what those numbers are going to look like or where that's going to be at. We dealt more with just the sport itself, and so we feel like those individual sports, we're hoping for sure with those, cross country being another one, swimming, again, now that that's inside, those numbers might be different, and but those individual sports, you have a little more flexibility. I mean, even worst case scenario in swimming, let's take, you could have a inter squad for it and count those times as qualifying times. If we'd have an official come in and make sure they're having legal starts and turns and those types of things. But so we've tried to look at all of those types of things. Our biggest challenge right now, and we're probably going to have to schedule a scheduling meeting the first part of August, is the invitationals. We have some of our sports that have very large invitationals, and I'll just give you an example of in cross country. The first weekend, Casper holds an invite here. Well, our tech guy and one of our gals in the office, they help with entries and results. We had 640 kids in that meet last year. Well, we know we're not going to be able to have 640 kids running that week, or we're assuming we won't be able to. So what we're looking at doing is trying to, we've sent out like a survey to schools, hey, what other weeks would you or could you host a track invite or a volleyball invite or, a golf invite, and try and reduce those numbers at those invites so that then we still would be able to have everybody playing and participating and doing it safely.
So you brought up the fans. So right now we're kind of hoping and best case scenarios plan A, but you're planning for what if. Where are you at with the fans? When will you make that type of a decision, Ron? And when do those conversations start?
Well, the conversations have already started because we had some of our schools that had to deal with that even with their graduations.
Okay.
And so our question to them right now is sitting down and looking at, if you are limited to fans, how are you going to do that at the school level for, let's just say a volleyball game, and since it's inside, they say you can have X number. Well, they have to have a plan in place to how, are you issuing tickets to just parents to start with, and both teams' parents get them first, and then after that, it's first come, first serve, or if they don't have a ticket, they're not getting in, you can't just show up at the door, that type of thing. So those discussions have already taken place, and because of graduations, I think that's helped them. They've learned some things through that, especially the ones that were allowed to actually have, like Wheatland at that time, they still didn't have any cases, and so they graduated on time and on their football field with fans in the stands. But they had a very intricate situation, plan in place,
right?
All the way to where if it was a split husband-wife thing and someone was going to come in from outside of Wheatland, they had to get there 14 days before graduation and quarantine before they'd be allowed to come in. And so, I mean, we just don't know where, how restricted we're going to be at that time, but definitely looking at trying to get plans in place for that. But from our standpoint, it's the kids is still our focus. We want them to be able to be participating and doing some things, and if we can figure out ways to do that, even if we can video stream things and be able to at least let people watch if we have to restrict.
Okay.
But trying to get the kids to participate, and that's our number one goal.
The next question I have for you is how much are you following and how encouraged are you that at least Legion Baseball has taken steps and they're having fans? And I was at a couple games the other day, and how encouraging is that to try and help you maybe plan for the future?
Well, I think it's going to be a big help. We're obviously hoping it's going to be very successful so that shows, the folks that are putting the difference down and restrictions, it can happen. Obviously, each sport is, like I said, a little different. Football is going to be different than golf, those types of things. But I think that is very encouraging, and we hope it continues to be successful for them. And, just all the protocols in place that you have to have from, whether that's masks or hand sanitizing and, cleaning things off in between innings or whatever they're doing, those types of things are all going to be important as we go forward as well.
Best case scenario, everything goes off hopefully without too many hitches. You mentioned maybe the possibility of interrupting things mid-season almost. Is that kind of what I gather from you?
That's part of a plan. If we were to get, and I don't know that they're going to be able to predict that, but I think also the medical experts are learning a lot as they're going through this as well, and so that should be helpful to all of us. I think we're also going to learn from the NFL and from the NCAA because they're starting to make some decisions here now, and we should have some time to see if what they're doing is working or not working. But yeah, just trying to really look at the big picture, and if the second, and we may never have a second wave. It might be in January or something. Who knows? But but if we were able to, because they were pretty accurate this spring of saying our spike was going to be at the end of April, 1st of May, and that was pretty close for most of us. So if they have that ability to say, wow, we're starting to see this, in maybe the bigger states and more populated, and it kind of trickles down type of thing, and said, if they gave us a heads up, we would go ahead, and if we want to have a culminating event if possible. So if that meant we had to shorten the season, and we're going to start this weekend with whether it's semifinals or whether it's state golf or state cross country, if we haven't had it yet, and then we've got some plans in place for that as well.
Okay.
And none of this is finalized yet, but just trying to have a plan in place. So, for example, let's say state cross country, we all of a sudden have to move it up 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever that looks like. We're going to have to make a decision. Do we go to 3 different sites then, so we can spread it out a little bit, spread the numbers and get it done, or will we still just go to, Star Valley's scheduled to host? Do we just go ahead and go there and run it? And again, at that time, it's going to be dictated by what types of numbers we're allowed to do. Again, hoping that the fact that it's outside, we'd be able to just run it as normal. We're just moving it up a little bit so we can have a state cross-country meet and not miss out on that like we had to with track and soccer.
I know that you have said all along, Ron, that you guys are following any sort of medical advice from the doctors in that community and the health department. Where is that balance for you and the board of directors in terms of conversations on just the risk factor in general? Because I've gotten questions, and I'm sure maybe you even have, in terms of that risk of this is no different than saying a student athlete gets injured type of a situation or something along those lines. Now, I know it's a lot more serious than that, don't get me wrong, but where is that kind of balance with the risk of whether there's a second wave or not, but there's still that risk out there regardless?
Yeah, and safety is going to be our number one concern as we go, and we will still continue to have those conversations with, we're in Casper, we're having them with our local health department here, as well as staying in contact with the State Department. That's the part that's going to be very difficult, I think, Dave, as far as there's not going to be competitive equity. I mean, it's just because of each county getting to control what their county, the situation they're in, and each county being in different places, there's going to be a potential that maybe some of the schools in a certain county can't participate it for a week or two or whatever.
Okay.
We have a plan in place for that. As far as in football and volleyball, if that happened, those games that they were scheduled to play will not be forfeits. They just didn't happen. And so we're going to be looking at probably coaches seeding, if that happens, to where coaches will seed then into tournaments or into the playoffs in football if they haven't been able to play everybody. So, those are some things we're looking at as well. Okay. That we get into transfer situations of if 3 or 4 schools are shut down, and it looks like they're going to be shut down for quite a while, and those kids want to move. What does that look like? I mean, so the academic requirements, obviously the spring was a lot different for the kids. Uh-huh. So we've just been having, all of those types of discussions as well as we go along with this. But safety is going to absolutely be our number one. And I think there'll be, if we're given the go to, in football is the one we're concerned about probably the most because of the contact and the numbers that we're dealing with and stuff. But if we're given the go and the State Department of Health's okay with it and we have a plan in place as far as, the schools will do a good job of making sure protocols are in place for keeping things as clean as they can and the safety of the kids and the fans and all of that. I'm not worried about that as much. then we'll probably go. And I'm sure we'll have some parents that, depending on their situation, they might have someone in their home that's, has a fragile health situation, and so they don't really want their kid playing, and
Right.
there's going to be some tough decisions, I'm sure, at the local level as well.
So does that mean a busier summer for you and the board and everybody else that's an administrator around the state, because we don't have necessarily concrete answers here a couple months out, that you guys have to have a lot more discussions coming up to maybe finalize some details?
I think detail-wise, we're pretty comfortable with where we're at least right now. But yeah, as far as the schools, especially, just even reopening schools and what's that going to look like, and the social distancing part of that is going to be huge. If that changes, as far as if you can wear a mask, then you can be a little closer, or those types of things. Right now, transportation is a huge issue. We don't know exactly if we would be able to play any sport right now if the requirements stay the same. I was told that right now on a 72 passenger bus they could have 12 kids. Well,
wow.
That's not. We don't have 8 buses available for our large schools to play football with, or even that barely takes that wouldn't even take a volleyball team probably. And so some of those types of things, I know they're discussing all of that at the state level, and so hopefully as time goes through the summer, some of those will get answered a little bit more by them to give the schools more guidance, because they're looking, from their standpoint, you're talking bus routes, and if you have to triple your bus routes or whatever number of buses, then that's a situation they're looking at the school level. And does that mean they can only bring half their kids to school one day and the other half the next, or is it a morning-afternoon thing? So yeah, there's just a lot of planning and discussions, more so than anything else at this point, just trying to get game plans in place, and the schools are kind of doing what we're doing right now. They're looking at tiers. If again everybody starts with, hey, we're back and every kid's coming to school all day and we're all good, and then they tier down that with more and more restrictions as they go, all the way back down to where they're not at school and they've got online learning going on again. And so that's kind of what we're doing, is we're starting with plan A of everything's normal, and then it gets more restrictive as we go, as far as how many games they would play or how that would look, and maybe we eliminate regionals in volleyball, and just trying to get, again, as many kids, as many opportunities to participate. If we just cut the season immediately, well, now just those teams that were winning are going to continue to get to play, and those other kids aren't. So that's part of our plan as well. Even like if we got to the football playoffs and let's say we had lost 4 games or whatever during the season because of it, then once we hit the playoffs, we would give those teams that didn't make the playoffs the opportunity, if they wanted to match up and get a game on that same weekend as quarterfinals, go for it.
I gotcha.
If it happened to be semifinals, then go for it. Let's at least keep kids, because we're really concerned with the mental health of our kids as well, and we know that these outlets in our sports can really be a positive for those kids, and being back around their teammates and the team building that they do in all of those different sports. So that's something we're really looking at as well.
I know you mentioned the action items. Wind River approved to have a cross-country team this fall. That one, not probably a big deal. You moved the golf championship for 3A from Laird to Lyman, so I'm assuming that's going to Evanston, basically?
Basically, yeah. That's their home course.
Okay.
Correct.
Yeah, and so that one pretty much makes sense because less issues in the Bridger Valley and over in Uinta County versus Fremont County. Is that how the board looked at that?
Yeah, they did at this point. Again, not knowing and trying to predict, Fremont County might be fine by then, but we just don't really know. So we thought Lander will get it the following year, so it isn't like they're losing it. Just give it a little more time to see where we're at that point the following year.
And then football, it was interesting, the running clock rule possibly changing, but then that got voted down unanimously. Where did that stem from? Where did those conversations start with possibly going from 45 to 35?
There's some that really feel that, and again, sometimes it comes down to ethics, and you can't always regulate those, but there's some that felt like some of the blowouts that we had, part of that was because coaches kept maybe their starters in longer than they needed to or should, and part of that was they wanted to make sure they made all state and all conference and got their stats up, and And so the flip of that, as we got into the talking about it, is if we went to 35, then those teams that are really trying to build and get better, their kids are actually going to continue to get less time if they're in games where, they're trying to keep it under 45, but 35 could happen pretty quick. And so our second halves might just be running clocks for those teams every week that have a younger team or whatever, And so we felt 45 was still all right, and that, ADs really, if they're in that situation, they need to be talking to their coaches about, making good decision and getting other kids playing times. And sometimes it's, especially in our six-man game, I mean, it's pretty difficult sometimes because they can score so quickly. A kid misses one tackle and bam, they're gone and they're scoring. And so some of those are a little deceptive at times. But just making sure that, we're, as coaches and as schools, that we're making the right decision and trying to not have those blowouts if we can help it.
Lastly, what are your next steps here moving forward, Ron, as you try and prepare as best as you can for the fall starting in August?
Well, our plan right now is to really start. We're going to meet in person next week with our county health, and just from the standpoint of we have, the 5 state tournaments here, at least right now scheduled here, and trying to get some benchmarks in place with them as well. We certainly don't want to have happened to any of our other state tournaments that happened in basketball where we had already started and then it got shut down. And obviously that was right at the start of all of this, so it was a little more understandable. So we want to kind of have that discussion with them. What are they looking at? What would be something that they know that they're going to shut us down, or or if that's a possibility, can we know a little further out and having those, and then also just having discussions with the State Department of Health, showing them some of our concerns. I'll give you an example of a very simple one. And I just don't know if they're going to give us the authority to do it. But the threshold for the temperature, we got everybody taking people's temperatures, whether it's fans or coaches or kids or whatever, when they come on and for workouts and that type of thing. Well, we've got everywhere from 99.5 to 100.5 that's being used as a threshold. So my concern is if you're in one of those districts or counties that is using, let's just say 100 for your threshold all year, and now we've got a state event, and they come here and they're using 99.5 here, so now a kid's at 99.7, and he'd be eligible at his county or his school, and he's not going to be eligible, and now he's not playing in the state tournament or running it. So just some of those things, if we can see if we can get some standardized things that would help and just not create situations that really we shouldn't have to be dealing with. So those kind of constant meetings still. We also are meeting at the national level, just trying to get feedback and see what others are doing there. We've got we're in Section 8, which is there's 6 states in the western part. So we combine Section 7 and 8, which gives us all the 11 western states, including Hawaii and Alaska, and just having discussions of, hey, what's your next step? Where are you doing it? We have a sports medicine advisory committee that's made up of some doctors and trainers, coaches and ADs. We've been utilizing them and getting their recommendations. And so, the biggest fear we have right now is everybody's chomping at the bit to get back so much, and most of our schools are being allowed right now. They're starting to get some kids back in. Let's not, next week we heard these kids haven't been doing anything for, 2 months or almost 3 months now, and so let's not go to that football camp next week and hit and go full speed and get kids hurt, or even basketball camps. Let's make sure they're ready before we start doing that. And I know some of the colleges that hold the football camps, they've moved theirs already to later July, it sounds like, and early August, and so we're looking at some of those types of things as well. Just trying to give them some guidance on making sure that we kind of start slow. Let's bring those kids back, and really the way it's structured, that's happening for the most part, because most of the plans are allowing, 1 kid per basket right now to work on shooting drills or those types of things, or 1 kid per lane in the swimming pool, and, trying to monitor that a little bit. But I anticipate that's going to move fairly quickly to where they can start bringing more kids in. And again, each school's different because of the county they're in right now, and how many cases and all of that stuff is kind of dictating everything.
Well, Commissioner Laird, it's been a couple months since we chatted. I appreciate the time today. Thanks so much.
You bet, Dave. Thank you. You have a good day.